Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being the show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 8 of Only Murders in the Building. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I guess the podcast has gotten a boost because of the whole Fallon situation, but I love the fact is that because they're still such a small podcast, but they have such devotee fans that, like, they have 4 fans who are outside the building, and they're all kind of complaining about stuff of being like, oh, Sting making a cameo? Yeah, like, oh, like Sting was going to be the murderer. It's like, do you guys even like this podcast? And they're like, yes, we do. Of course, we love it. Then stop complaining, because they're like, right, they haven't released a new episode, like, what's going on here? Like, and, you know, the main, like, head honcho fan, Sam, is like, no, don't worry about it. Have faith and belief in them. At the same time, I was surprised the whole Teddy just simply him threatening Mabel and Oliver. I'm surprised that's all that was, because I was so certain, like, oh man, Theo's gonna take you out and pop. But no, or at least attempt to. But it's like, no, what they do in fact is they end up threatening, and I'm like, with everything on the line, why would you just threaten them? So I thought that was interesting. And then even Teddy saying, like, Tim Kono, we know nothing about it. So I'm like, wait, so you guys didn't murder him. So I'm like, who the hell did? You had all the motive to do it, especially considering Tim was gathering up all this evidence against you. And I wondered, was Teddy and Theo completely unaware what Tim was up to at that time? So maybe that's what that is. Maybe they were completely unaware of, like, how close he was getting, because they didn't seem to, because, like, why wouldn't you jump on the Tim thing sooner? I guess they thought they had him in check and didn't worry about it, so they were going to get blindsided by that. Maybe not. But, you know, Teddy made it clear. It's like, and I thought that was interesting. He has his seat, and he's like, right, I have it designed this way so that Theo can't see or hear me say things. I mean, well, so he doesn't read my lips. And there's certain things a son should never know his father said, because apparently he used to, like, was so sad about having a deaf son. He said it even cost me my marriage. Well, that and all the horrors. I'm like, I think that's the main thing, but regardless. But for him, he's like, I learned ASL, which he's like, a lot of parents of deaf children don't. I'm like, I wonder, is that him just being hyperbolic, or what? Is there some truth in that statistically? A lot of, maybe, like, I'm curious. I'm gonna be interested to look into statistics of that. Like, is that like a true statistic, or is that just Teddy just trying to fluff his own fluff and trying to make himself seem better than what he was? Either way, made it pretty clear. Put out one last episode and end this once and for all. You got till 7 a.m. tomorrow. If not, we're going to have an issue. So, and at the same time, they just get dealt with being threatened. Oh, here's our number one fans being like, hey guys, oh my God, like, when's the next episode going up? And she's like, she's like, oh my God, are these our fans? And he's like, oh, thank God, we have fans. And they were like, yeah, when's the next episode coming up? And Oliver, we don't work for you, you vultures. It's like, you're so excited, but you turned against him. I guess as the artiste that he is, he doesn't like being rushed. It's like, it comes when it comes. Like, don't rush us. So they go to talk to Charles, who was too busy getting it on with Jan, which last episode I was like, I couldn't remember if it was Jan or Jan. And Jan's just as much of a part of this as they're, like, breaking this all down, figuring it out. Jan's putting in her input because they went through everything in Tim's phone, and they figured out they kind of filled in a lot of the blanks that Oliver and Mabel were missing, that Tim saw Theo kill Zoe, and that basically he's been doing it. It seems like he's been working on this the past 10 years. So I thought his confrontation with Mabel was what led. I mean, I'm under because he said 10 years ago, so I'm assuming that was relatively soon, like recently, that they had that conversation. So I assume that's when things start jumping off. But it seems like maybe in that 10-year period, Tim had been secretly, slowly but surely building up a case against Teddy and Theo. Maybe not. I don't know. We don't know. But they make it seem like he was doing it for way longer than maybe I was kind of under the impression of. But yeah. And obviously this kind of puts him in perspective in a situation of, like, right, well, we now have even more of an idea, like, the Demuses. This is about the ring that Zoe had and everything. And then they ended up having to turn to an ally, someone outside of all of this to help them, and getting a different perspective in things. And they ended up getting Detective Williams involved. And I love that back and forth when Charles is doing his Brazos thing, and she's like, okay, like, I figured about the Tim murder thing, but I have no idea what the fuck the rest of that means. He's like, oh, isn't that cop talk? And she's like, no, it's not. So, and I love the whole thing of like, right, you got to find out the who, the why, and the how, and why now. And then they're like, okay, and the what? They were like, wait, what? She's like, no, not what. Why would you say what? I didn't say what. I said the why, the how, the who, and the why now. And they're like, okay, the why and the what? No, not the what. I get not the what, why. I'm like, I love how they're messing that up so much. But they have Jan's help. Then Oscar comes over, and Oliver's so nitpicky that he's like getting on Jen about her pizza rolls and stuff. But I thought that was so interesting that Mabel and Oliver were so like against Jen. I guess because they were looking at her like, oh, you're the outsider. This is kind of our thing. You don't really know what you're talking about. Kind of leave it to the professionals. We've been investigating this for a while. You come here kind of assuming you know everything. Because it's also that thing of like, right, I guess it's almost interesting because I guess it's almost a little reflective of the Hardy Boys to some extent. Or like Mabel and her Hardy Boys, right? There's almost like this kind of like interesting, like I think parallel you can draw between that. Two guys, two girls kind of a part of this group as well. And I guess it was a situation of, but I think it's also like, once again, they just assume like, right, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Because like, right, we have the experience because we've listened to other true crime podcasts. So we know what we're talking about, putting it all on the Demuses. But when Jan's involved, she kind of says like, no, like maybe you should be looking at this Howard guy because we still don't know how the cat fits into all of this because that cat also died that same night. Which, you know, jumping ahead a little bit, we find out that Tim was poisoned. Interestingly enough, because we still haven't circled back to Oliver's dog getting poisoned. You know, Oliver made a point of it, but he hasn't brought it up in a couple episodes, right? So there's still that connection. So whatever killed that cat most likely killed Tim, which also killed poisoned Oliver's dog, Winnie. So there's a correlation there. Because whoever it was, I poisoned him and then set up the suicide situation after the fact. But why? Why did they... I guess they figured if they set it up as a suicide, no one would bother doing a toxicology report, I guess. Because they knew that they would just label it as a suicide, so maybe that's all they needed. So, I don't know. Thought that was kind of interesting. But Jen kept going on about the Howard thing, but no one wanted to listen to her. So I love Oliver getting the three outside because one of the fans had to go do a piano lesson. And it's like, oh yeah, kids these days, all they want to do is binge. They can't, you know, wait like week to week or something like that. And the guy was like, and then what's his name? Marv immediately talked about, yeah, my marriage is on the rocks or something like that. And you have Oliver being like, Jesus. But kind of brings the fans in, which they see Oscar and they're like, oh my God, you're Tie guy. Oh my God, OG. And then it's like, oh, hi, this is Jen, my girlfriend. She's like, wait, I'm your girlfriend? He's like, yeah. And it's like, oh, you two are adorable. But it makes Oliver and Mabel, they're just like, oh, because especially because Charles is like, right, you're bringing, you know, that's my girlfriend you talk about here. Did I also mention that we had sex? I don't know if I mentioned this. Like, yes, you've mentioned it already, Charles. Every chance you got. I guess because it's just been that long. He's like, I gotta enjoy this while it's lasted. But and then Oliver doing his reenactment, and I love that this time, like obviously when he picked Howard the first time, it was all inside of his head, and then he moved on to did he move? Yeah, he moved on to someone else after that. But regardless, I love that he did that whole stage performance thing in his head, and now he's like legitimately getting the three fans to act it. I'm like, that actress. I was like, why do I recognize her? Like, one of the fans, I'm like, why do I recognize her? And I'm like, I think Dexter New Blood is what I think she worked at the police department. I think because I was like, I knew it was something relatively new-ish. I had seen her, but I think it was Dexter New Blood. if I'm not mistaken, I think that's because I was like, she looks so recognizable, and I think that's what it was. Either way, them all kind of playing into the reenactment, and I love when Sam is playing Tim, and he does like the very dramatic death, and Oliver's like, okay, we'll work on that. It's fine for now, but it's like, oh, all our ducks are in a row, everything's good, everything's kosher, we got them. But the problem is, Jen's still like, I don't know, guys, because the more and more she kept pushing it, I'm like, at first I was like, does she have some involvement in this? But I'm like, if she did, why would she be pointing it at, like, Howard instead of the Demuses? Not unless she's getting a slice of that pie. Not unless, because I was about to say, maybe she's pulling it away from the Demuses. Because I feel like if she was involved, like, either way, it'd be fine with the Demuses taking the fall. Unless them taking the fall would eventually trail back to you. Because... well, maybe because she secretly knew about their alibi and wanted to point to someone else before that got found out. Or two, maybe she's connected to the Demuses and they're grave robbing or stuff like that. I don't know. Or maybe it's just genuinely like, because I'm like, oh, because everyone in this building has their secrets. So I was just wondering, like, we've learned a little bit about Jan and her personal life, but I'm like, have we really gotten into her secrets yet? Because we as the audience know Oliver, Charles, as well as, Mabel's, and now we know Oscar's secret. Like, hers is still kind of not clear. I mean, other than what she told Charles during their first date. So I'm curious. Like I said, she kind of is on my list, but then off my list of suspects. Yes, she got potentially stabbed at the end, but it's also like, yeah, but plenty of people fake that stuff just to be like, oh, and take yourself off the suspect list by making yourself look like a victim. She did have someone put a note on her door saying, I'm watching you. So this could have been like a scapegoat type of, not scapegoat, but like, once again, making yourself seem like the victim in some other regard of like, yes, someone was watching her, but maybe she's got her own secrets. She's up to some shady stuff and they were on to her. Because that might not be like Tim's real killer, because Detective Williams, when she was hearing the episode when it went up, I love it. She was like, no shit, when she was hearing everything break down, and we see all the different fans, people in the building, Lester, the door guy, we see Will, Oliver's son, listening as well. Like, everyone's tuned in, and so are the fans. But then it's like, it's a little too clean, and as Jen put it, isn't it a little too easy to kind of put it all on the Demuses? Because once again, where's Zoe's ring? Like, because we know the last time, because Tim apparently had the ring the night he died. So it's like, right. So he eventually, because I guess Theo and Teddy sold it. That Cutter guy sold it to someone and ended up selling it to Tim. So Tim had it. So it's like, right, if the Demuses, do they actually have it? Because even Charles, listening to Jan being like, are we really sure to put all our ducks in this row? Like, are we really, really sure before we do this episode? And so they were very gung-ho about it, but it's like, yeah, I don't think it's, when you're sure, when you think you're so sure, that's kind of when you have to take a step back. I mean, the Teddy and Theo are guilty of everything else, but this was all predicated on the murder of Tim. So I think they'd still go down for everything else. I don't know if them having an alibi for Tim's murder, whether that blows a hole in everything else, because it's like, right, if you're wrong about this, you could be wrong about everything else, because it's all inferred upon. Like, I don't know if everything else they're getting stuck with is enough that they'd get stuck with that, and if they're not, like, if Tim's murder and them not being his murderer, like, would that end up being an issue later on? Would that kind of like play against their attempts to take them down for everything else? I mean, obviously, it's like Detective Williams is upset because it's like, damn it, like, they're not responsible because one of your neighbors' ring doorbells caught them they had left the building at the time of the fire alarm. They weren't at Tim's, so they're definitely not neither one of them's the killer. So, plus Tim being poisoned, and it's like, right, the gunshot was after the fact. So, it kind of ends up destroying a lot of their premise. And like I said, I think that would translate over to everything else, but I think they would still potentially end up I don't know. Because that was the domino that led to them getting arrested, was everything else getting stacked on top of the Tim thing. But you get rid of the Tim thing, because they even said it themselves. Everything at best without Zoe's ring is circumstantial. So I'm talking myself through the process. I'm sorry I'm like rambling so much about it, but I'm trying to figure out in my head that I think without evidence proving that they killed Tim, everything else is that circumstantial. So without something clear like that, it kind of undoes everything else. So they probably will get to walk away, and that could turn into a whole nasty situation, because like, right, you can also end up getting sued for defamation. So, I think that could get into a nasty situation. Plus, there's also still a murderer in the building, so. But even like Sam and the other fans are kind of like, yeah, but isn't something still bothering you? Like, but why would he hire people to do a podcast? Like he knew that would eventually come back on him. And Sam was like, maybe hubris. And Marvel was like, yeah, but everyone always says it's hubris. Even I was, because once again, it was mainly just to see what they knew about his operation. But I think this is all about his grave robbing operation. And yes, Theo did kill Zoe, but it seems like they had once again, did they even know that Tim was doing what he was doing? So they might not even had a reason to come after him, because for the past 10 years, Tim kept quiet like he was told to. So, well, at least to Teddy and Theo's knowledge. So. But the episode's already kind of gone up, and they're going to have to probably make a retraction for that episode. I mean, they'll probably keep it up, but it's just kind of like, right, we got to apologize for claiming it was a demon. Actually, this adventure goes even deeper. There's actually a lot more at play here. So Charles goes to apologize to Jan and finds her on the floor, so mystery continues. But there's also a little not side note, but there's an aspect to this episode I didn't talk about, was Mabel and Oscar. They found a whole bunch of stuff on Tim's phone. It was specifically a video of him saying, right, everything he saw those years ago, his silence, he can never make up for that, his years of silence, plus all the time that Oscar lost, but he can at the very least do some good to kind of make up for everything. Like, he can't make up for it, but he can at least do the right thing now, and make sure like the Demuses pay for Zoe's death, and Oscar's name gets cleared. So, and obviously Oscar and him had issues, but now that was why he wanted to go beat up Tim, like when he wanted to confront him. But the alarm went. Well, he heard the gunshot, and the because that was after the alarm had already gone off. So. Either way, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about today.